Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
It is looking festive where you are.
Festive where you are. Happy. I believe I'm legally obligated to say happy holidays now. I'm not allowed to say the X word.
That's what terrorists say. Happy holidays. We both, if you're not watching this, if you're listening, we both have these very Christmassy, I'll say it, backgrounds.
Now, I don't know if you noticed, Matt. I mean, one of your member of your brood is a fan of Animal Crossing. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Now, has he talked to you about the winter update?
No, actually, when you say is that still the case, I feel like they've phased it out a little bit in favor of some other games. I've not heard. Well, I think I have heard about the winter update. It gets very festive, right? I mean,
it does, but the 24th is called Toy Day, not Christmas Eve. So I was wondering if that sparked any conversation in your household.
Luckily, that game is phased down a little bit as other games have increased. I tell you, these games are. I'm fascinated by. When I was a kid, you bought a game, like it could have been a cool game or whatever, but you had the game and it was static. Like
what did you have? Did you have a video game system at home?
We'll just use Super Mario Brothers as an example.
But you had Nintendo?
I had Atari and Nintendo.
Okay. I had ColecoVision with the Atari expansion module.
Okay. But either way, we had games, and once you bought the game, there weren't updates to the game.
Right.
And if your mom said you had an hour to play, you could pretty much have an hour to play. But the way these games work now are so addictive, right? Because you get, some of these games are actually free. They're free, but then you have to buy skins and you can buy. And so it's like a racket. And psychologically, they're doing all these things, all these changes to the game constantly, updates and changes to keep you like hooked. And you gotta log on today at 3 because there's a big thing happening today at 3.
Yep.
And so it's not just, I can play the game whenever. It's like you're part of a community, you're part of a movement, and they suck you in. And of course, my kids are not fully prepared, to deal with this sort of seduction of the gaming industry.
Well, one of my kids is starting to play games where you can, meet other people, and they're young, and so we're saying you cannot meet other people. You're not supposed to do that. You're not making friends with these people. So we're having to really keep an eye on things, make sure that doesn't go down a very dark path.
Yeah. But I'm also getting the peer pressure, which is like my son, who's very smart. I mean, he should be, if he's not a gamer or a coder, he could be a lawyer because he's a hell of an arguer. But he basically made the case to me that that gaming is one of the few things he excels at, and also it's a way for him to make friends with his classmates, like people he knows in real life after school. And then it's like, I'm not going to be part of the cool crowd if I can't play Wednesdays at 3:30 when all the other kids are playing. So it's almost guilting you into it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then he'll be like, they said Bill Gates was wasting his time. They said Steve Jobs was a loser hanging out in his garage. Like, I'm developing skills. And old man, you may not get it. But I'm developing skills that are actually going to be useful for me in the future. And I'm like, okay, fine, play the game. Just leave me out of it. So that's kind of where we are. I will say the Toy Day or the Christmas thing. I don't like the commercialism of it, and the consumerism of it in general. But I don't go to Nintendo for my spiritual or theological training for my children. So, I'm not too worried about that part of it. I should be more concerned about the consumerism angle than the secularization of the holiday.
Well, but the two things are intertwined.
They certainly are, except that Christian conservatives have probably been much more guilty of of supporting the consumerism side of it, as opposed to the war on Christmas thing.
Now,
they're tied in, but I think there's also a distinction.
One last Christmas question before we get on to real business is: are there going to be have any Christmas holiday movie traditions been established?
Well, yes. Every Thanksgiving we now watch Home Alone, which I've found to be amazingly good. Like, I saw it when it came out at the theaters the first time, 35 years ago or whatever. Gosh, it's been a long time. A long time ago. But now in the last 2 or 3 years, we've watched it every Thanksgiving, and it is such a well-done movie. It's well-written, it's well-acted, and, I've listened to the Bill Simmons Rewatchables podcast where they talk about it. I've seen the Netflix Movies That Made Us or whatever documentary about the making of it, and what a great movie. We've also started watching, this will be our second year, on Christmas Eve, there's a movie called The Man Who Invented Christmas, which is about Dickens writing A Christmas Carol, which I think is an underrated movie. We're not quite. I so want to show my kids Die Hard, but I just don't think it's appropriate yet.
Right.
But that's a couple years from now, and I'm going to establish that. Then again, I argue it's not really a Christmas movie, but that's a whole other debate.
Well, we will watch Home Alone. Now, I did not see Home Alone as a kid. And I managed to avoid seeing it until last year.
Wow.
And I think it is not good. I think I made the right decision not watching it earlier. But my kids like it now. Now they want that to be holiday tradition, so we will watch it again soon.
Do you think Home Alone is a good movie?
I do not think it's a good movie.
Sometimes I feel like I don't even know.
I don't even know how to. It just seems sort of obvious that it's not a good movie.
Oh man,
I'm trying to put it into words.
It's got everything. But anyway. We got dinged by some of the viewers last week for spending a half hour talking about pop culture. So,
but I want to say one last thing, though. One last thing.
Yeah.
I did manage. So I have watched, not with my kids, with my other family, WKRP.
This is your other wife and your other kids?
Well, last year was with more family than this year.
Okay.
This year was with my mom, and we have one family we've been potting with.
So you don't have two. You're not living a double life.
No, I'm not Charles Lindbergh. What's that?
Did Charles Lindbergh have two families?
Yeah, he had a straight up secret family. Wow. That his first originally didn't know about till he died.
Here's the thing: I could totally understand having a mistress. But why would someone want to have a whole second
full-blown secret family in another country?
And seems like additional work.
I think it definitely was.
It's like a Family Ties episode on crack. It's like the time Alex had 2 prom dates. It's impossible to pull it off.
I learned that in the book Those Angry Days, which is about Lindbergh and FDR, which is a really great book. And you don't get hit with the secret family thing till the very end. And, maybe other people knew that thing, but I didn't. And I was like, whoa, secret family, what the hell? You've already established that he's like a proto-fascist. Now you get secret family on top of it. Anyway, I did manage to watch with my older daughter the Cheers Thanksgiving episode.
Yeah.
Which I had
a food fight, right?
Right, which I hadn't seen in a long time. And that's a tight episode. That's an episode that holds up. And she seemed properly impressed by it.
Okay, well, while we're going there, let me plug the Andy Griffith Christmas episode. The Andy Griffith Show Christmas episode is good, and the Happy Days Christmas episode.
I don't think I've seen that in a long time.
Remember that?
I don't.
Fonzie tells everybody he's going out of town to visit his cousin for Christmas or his brother or whatever, but Richie finds out that he's like celebrating Christmas all by himself in his little dingy apartment. And it's super sad. And then Richie and Tom Bosley, Mr. C, go over and find a way, because of course Fonzie can't admit that he's vulnerable or pathetic.
Right.
And so they have to find an excuse why they need Fonzie to go tomorrow. We really need you at the Cunningham household tonight for our festivities. And it's heartwarming, Bill.
Well, the one other thing that we did on Thanksgiving, this is my daughter's intend to make this into a tradition. We watched the Perfect Strangers Thanksgiving episode.
That exists.
It's not the Strong Perfect Strangers episode. That's when cousin Larry buys 50 turkeys as part of a get-rich-quick scheme, which goes awry when they think one of the turkeys ate Jennifer's wedding ring or engagement ring, and they sell the turkey, and they then bust into this family's Thanksgiving dinner and try to dig into the turkey to find the ring. So, not a great episode, but perhaps a Cher family tradition now.
I haven't seen that show since it aired, like in prime time. I've never seen any reruns.
It's on Hulu. On Hulu.
I don't have Hulu. I used to watch it like on. I think it was was it Wednesday nights or was it like the TGIF thing?
At some point, it got on TGIF. I don't think it was. I don't know if it was there the whole time.
It is so weird. I can still tell you what night shows were on. Like Newhart was on Monday night.
Right.
The Simpsons ended up Sunday night. I think they started Thursday night, right? They were up against Cosby.
At some point, they were up against Cosby. They might have started on Sunday, though.
Thursday nights, you got your Family Ties, you got your Cosby, you got your Cheers. And then it was Night Court. Wings, I think. Wings might have come in there at the end.
Yeah.
Is it bizarre that I could tell you what night shows came on 35 years ago? That's a problem.
Now you should try Perfect Strangers. You should get on Hulu. You should do whatever you got. I don't know if you got to pay for Perfect Strangers or not, but when I was trying to think of shows, like old shows I could watch with the kids, so many have lots of inappropriate things. And Perfect Strangers isn't completely perfect in this area, but it's such physical comedy that it's not dated. And so I think it is a timeless TV classic.
I liked it. I was a fan. I was a regular viewer of that show. And I think that I forget the theme, but it was a good opening theme as well, as I recall.
Anyway, we've yabbered long enough, I'm sure.
So you ruined it for me. I was going to be the one. I was all set to be the one that said, but enough putting off politics, Bill. Let's go ahead. And then you blocked me from that, and then you did it. You have to do that.
We all have our jobs, Matt. you were encroaching on my turf. So, do you think it is possible that this guy, Lin Wood, who's a Trump lawyer, who went down to Georgia, or who's from Georgia.
Lin Wood down to Georgia.
And told the Trumpers at this rally that they should not vote for Loeffler and Perdue because everything's rigged and Republicans should be taught a lesson. Do you think that has any weight with Georgian Republican voters?
I think this could be very devastating. I think this could be because you've got a couple themes, right? There's one theme says, why vote? Because the election is going to be stolen anyway, right? There are people who are going to rig the election using these voting machines. So it's a waste of time to vote. But the only people who believe that are Republicans, right? Mm-hmm. The only people who believe the election is going to be stolen. So that could depress turnout. Secondly, Lin Wood is saying that Loeffler and Perdue didn't stand up for Trump. They don't deserve your vote.
But that's not even true. I mean, they did complain that everything was rigged, and they did say the Secretary of State should resign. Why are they blaming Loeffler and Perdue for it?
Well, they're not committing suicide enough, right? I mean, they're trying to basically not be portrayed as insane, but also they're trying to do enough to keep Trump happy, but not so much that it would like completely cost them votes amongst normal people who are not insane. And so that's with Trump demands 100% absolute fealty. It's not enough to just give him a little bit. You have to go all in. And they're not going all in enough, right? They're not going full Trump. And so it's a wedge issue, right? It's a wedge issue between Loeffler and Perdue and the voters that they need. But I don't think that Linwood, I don't think he's a Democrat plant. Like, I don't think that he is.
Because some people are trying to make that suggestion now.
Yeah. I think that he is a Trump person and that this is authentic and legit, even though it's crazy and insane. And I think it could cost Republicans the Senate potentially. And part of it is not only, again, that you've got these two things happening, people believing that why waste my time, it's fixed, and people believing that Loeffler and Perdue are basically establishment hacks who aren't doing enough for Trump. But these things can be weaponized by Democrats and progressive outside groups. You could obviously take comments that Trump has made, take comments that Linwood has made. There's a billboard somewhere in Atlanta or something that basically says, don't vote for these two Republicans because they don't stand up for Trump. And I believe it's paid for by some progressive outside group. So even though I don't think Linwood is a Democratic plant, I believe that he is enabling progressives to weaponize his comments.
I imagine some kind of super PAC, some kind of independent expenditure Democratic group is going to take the Linwood clip,
sure,
and make it into an ad targeting white rural Georgia.
I mean, it would be so easy to do, whether it's TV or social media or radio, Rush Limbaugh, local Rush, whatever it is, or, targeting these conservative, I hate to use the word conservative, these right-wing voters in Georgia would be so easy to do. It's such an obvious thing. And this is a situation where, all things being equal, these two Republicans should probably both win this runoff on January 5th. They just should. And now they very well may not. And that's the control of the Senate. I mean, if Joe Biden gets a Supreme Court pick, that will be a big deal.
Yes, and to that end, I mean, if you are a regular Republican, the notion that you would lose all this judicial ground that you gained because Democrats got 50 votes in the Senate, there's no filibuster for judicial nominations anymore, all the lower court nominations Biden can get through easily, and if there's a Supreme Court opening, Biden can fill that easily. That's got to be really demoralizing if that happens. If you're a Trumper, first and foremost, if you're a Trumper more than you are a Republican, maybe you don't care about that. Maybe it is perfectly fine if Democrats have the trifecta in Washington and you get to shake your fist and rail at all the stuff that they do and try to set the stage for the Trump comeback because you're not as policy oriented as the regular Republican is.
I think that's exactly right. And I think that Trump is selfish. He doesn't care about the Republican Party. He doesn't care about the conservative movement. He doesn't care about public policy. And what he does, the only people he has leverage on are Republican politicians. He has so much leverage, and he is basically saying, you have to be 100% with me, loyal. You have to drink the Kool-Aid, or else I'm willing to cut you loose. And that is the position they are in. They are being squeezed because you know what Loeffler and Perdue want to do, right? I mean, what they want to do is basically they want to, be Trumpy enough that the base turns out for them, but also portray themselves as somewhat normal Republicans so they can win over some suburbanites and all that. And a normal president like Trump, a normal president would let them do that. That's what they need to do to win. If they need to craft out this middle, niche, let them do that. Trump won't let them do it. And now it's not even Trump. It's these other
randos.
Linwood, right? And I mean, I think that Trump permits this to happen. It's almost like I'm talking about the divine. Like, he doesn't cause it to happen, but Trump permits this to happen. And
the wonder-working power of Trump.
Yes. Well, in a way, it's a sign of like when something really takes off or goes viral, like it's passive income. Like Trump doesn't even need to be directing it. You know, it's like he's got these cells that now can like do his bidding or what they think he would want them to do without him. It's plausible deniability. He doesn't have to tell them what to do. They know what to do.
And one thing I noticed, there was I think it was a Times article that pointed out that almost every ad, like literally every ad that Perdue was running and almost every ad that Loeffler was running, was a negative ad. Negative or a contrast ad with negative elements. And since then, I think both campaigns have started to do some positive ads so they don't get tagged with that. And, you know, remember, Loeffler had an ad in the initial phase of the campaign, which was largely running against Doug Collins, where she had this ad like, she's more conservative than Attila the Hun. Yeah. And let's eliminate the liberal scribes.
And by the way, I just want to stop. I have not had a chance to make a point. The expression has never been, I'm more conservative than Attila the Hun. It's, I'm more to the right, or I'm to the right of Attila the Hun. Attila the Hun was not conservative. And the expression has never been that. No one has ever said that, as far as I know, until Kelly Loeffler. And to me, it sounds like when Mitt Romney said he was severely conservative. It's inauthentic. It's not something that a conservative would ever even say. Right. I mean, but, that's like, I'm to the right of Mussolini. I mean, like, would you want to, like, it's supposed to be a joke, number one, and it's not conservative. It's an indictment on conservatism.
Well, but of course, it worked to make the runoff.
Well, I mean, it didn't. We're confusing correlation with causation, but
all I know is she's there. She made the runoff. She was left for dead. Yeah. People thought she had no chance. And she ran a campaign based on, I'm the most conservative right-wing person in this race, and she made the runoff. Whether it's that one ad or not, is somewhat beside the point. But the ad she's running now, the positive ad she's running now, is, I have a comprehensive health plan for all Georgians. And I have an African-American spokesperson, touting my bona fides. And David Perdue has an ad talking about how he's going to get things done in Washington and work with everybody. They're running much softer ads for the general, which is why, there's a part of me that agrees with you that they should win this race. It's still a right-leaning state. Biden did win it, but with a plurality, because the Libertarians had a little slice of the vote there. So in a two-person race, it should tilt Republican still. But those ads tell me that they are aware that Georgia is a bona fide purple state now. They can't win a general just on red meat to the right wing base. They need more than that to get to 50%.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's true. But I think that in a normal world, they would be allowed to do this. They would be allowed to go. They wouldn't have to be, 100% throwing right-wing red meat, that you could go to the center and the general, as they say, a little bit. But Trump's not allowing that, or the Trump forces are not allowing that. And again, I mean, it very well could be the case that not only did Trump lose the White House, but that he will take down a Republican Senate. And it would be a weird turn of events if that happens. And obviously, he's gonna, I mean, to me, this is like, if Republicans were to lose the Senate, it would be further proof that, like, this is what you guys, by supporting Trump, congrats.
Now, I don't want us to fall into the trap of, still talking about Trump all the time when we all should, get on with our lives. But Trump makes it hard. He said this week to a White House party that he wants 4 more years now. If not, I'll see you in 4 years' time. Something like along those lines. A clear signal he's planning to run again.
Yeah.
So 1, do you take him at face value? 2, do the other Republican candidates take him at face value? Potential candidates. And if so, I would think if you want to run and you believe Trump is going to run, then you have to start being in opposition to Trump. If you think, maybe he's just blowing smoke, then you still kiss Trump's ass in hoping of keeping his supporters when Trump says, forget about it.
Yeah. Well, everything we know about their history is the kissing ass philosophy, right? I mean, Ted Cruz did exactly that in 2016.
After the convention.
No, I'm talking about.
When he started being Trump's best friend, and then they had their rift, and now they're best friends again.
No, I mean, if you go back to what happened throughout the primary, Ted Cruz was sucking up to Donald Trump, because he assumed that Trump would drop out and that Cruz would inherit his supporters. So for months and months, Cruz built up Donald Trump, allowed him to gain steam.
But there was a point.
At some point.
There was a break. But there was a break. Once you realize that's not going to work.
Yeah.
That's when Cruz and it was too late. But,
it was too late.
My point is, there is a capacity of the individual who really wants the presidency to recognize reality and say, I have no choice but to take on Trump.
The game theory of 2016 again, though, right? So, the game theory was, remember Jeb Bush and Mike Murphy, they were like, it's not our job to take out Donald Trump.
Right.
We're worried about, Marco Rubio. Let somebody else do it. And so I think that's going to be at play, too. Even if they think, well, somebody's going to have to stand up to Trump, it's always going to be let's let the other guy be brave. We'll draft, we'll run behind that person. And then we could say, we always liked Trump, and I can't believe he caught him out. So I don't think that there's going to be a lot of boldness or courage. I know that there were some blind quotes, in a Politico piece, talking about how things are going to be different. And the fact that you're afraid to put your name behind the quote suggests to me that you're still a wimp. Okay. Right. And so I don't have any optimism there. Now, I think that Trump may very well run again, but even if he doesn't, he's going to pretend that he will, or he's going to just postpone he's going to act as if he's going to run again because he has nothing to lose. He doesn't care about the Republican Party or the conservative movement. So he doesn't care that he would be freezing in place the money, or that he would be the eventual nominee will be behind the curve, won't have a chance to build. He doesn't care about that. It's all selfishness. So I think he's going to want the publicity and the attention. And then he either will run himself, or he'll get to be the kingmaker, or or Don Jr. will run, right? You're never, I compared it in a Daily Beast piece recently to you'll have somebody who there's some crazy old rich guy, and then, you'll work for him at the store, as a loyal servant, thinking someday maybe he'll leave you an inheritance, or he'll leave the store to you. And then he gives it away, gambles it away, or gives it to his deadbeat son, Trump is never going to love you back. He's never going to reward loyalty. So you might as well, be bold and take a shot, right?
So you have no hope that, couldn't somebody go first? Couldn't somebody?
Well, I think someone like a Larry Hogan might, someone who's never played the game. Larry Hogan, the governor of Maryland, has never played the game of sucking up to Trump. And so I think Larry Hogan might get in and run aggressively. But
he's a blue state Republican, with a very moderate base, and so that kind of candidate, that John Huntsman, John Kasich, Bill Weld kind of candidate, hasn't shown much of a base in the party.
There is a difference. In fairness to Hogan, he's more of a Chris Christie. Bill Weld and John Kasich and who else did you mention? Huntsman. Huntsman and who's the guy from Arizona? How quickly we forget.
John McCain?
No. The other senator from Arizona who left when Donald Trump chased him.
Jeff Flake.
Jeff Flake. All these guys have a soft quality about them. Like, I'm not saying that they're soft, but I'm saying that they have a nice, gentle, like, sweetness about them. I mean, I know Kasich's are curmudgeon, but they don't seem tough. Guess who does? Larry Hogan has more of a Chris Christie quality, right? So Hogan is going to have a moderate background, but he's going to combine it with a tough temperament. Well, and I think that makes. I think that I'm not saying it works, but I think it's a better matchup.
I mean, slightly, but it didn't help Christie. I mean, Christie was very Trumpy in many ways. I mean, he was a blowhard. He was an alpha.
If Christie had run in 2012, I think he would have been the nominee.
Maybe then, but the problem was that at the end of 2012, he hugged Barack Obama, and that poisoned him with the Republican base. He never could escape that. And Larry Hogan seems to be. I mean, he doesn't have something that's quite as dramatic, but he's got plenty of sound bites where he's talking trash about Trump and plenty of things he's done with Democrats in Maryland.
This is a guy who
would weigh him down.
This is a guy who beat cancer. This is a guy who. Stood up, they're rioting in Baltimore and went after, Obama and the mayor of Baltimore. This is a guy who's won a landslide, 2 elections in Maryland, which is super hard to do. I think he might have been the second Republican in Maryland history to win re-election. I forget the details.
Rudy Ehrlich was before him? Would Ehrlich win twice?
Ehrlich won once.
Okay.
He lost re-election, even though he had a really high approval rating. And then Ehrlich ran again and lost again, as I recall.
Okay.
But whatever the case may be, I don't know. I think that I'm not saying Hogan can do it, and I would not bet on Hogan. But I think there's a chance because – I think he has that Chris Christie, and there's also there's a Maryland blue collar thing. I don't know how to describe it, but he has that everyman, quality about him that I think is more. I think there's a chance he could catch on.
But it sounds like you like Hogan.
I do like Hogan.
So, would you? Would you be a Hogan stan if he runs? Are you that all in at this point?
I need to look a little bit more into his pro-life position and background. I mean, my understanding is he basically says he's pro-life, but then he says he's not going to do anything about it because I couldn't anyway. Like in Maryland, he's sort of got around that issue. Mm-hmm. But I will say that I'll put an asterisk there. But otherwise. I kind of am a fan of Larry Hogan, to be honest, just because, he has he stood up against Trump. There's the personal story of beating cancer. I read his book. I interviewed him for the Texas Tribune Festival a couple months ago. So you can go watch that video or listen to the podcast. Right now, if I had to say of all the people, I think he's one of the few Republicans that has actually not embarrassed himself. And again, I mean, a 2-term governor I'm from Maryland, so I'm biased there. There was a story about how his dad ruined the best night of my life.
Right.
Which I could tell another day.
You're putting that aside.
The funny thing is, the first time he ran, I thought about creating this negative ad. It was just fun, a negative ad detailing the story. This is before his father passed away too. So it wouldn't, nowadays I think it would not be in as good of taste, but I was going to run, sort of like a mockumentary of the night. Anyway.
Let's shift gears because the biggest news in the Biden cabinet saga, which has generally been a pretty humdrum affair. Then you have the Neera Tanden nomination, and now there's a controversy. Now you have people on the Bernie-crat side of the fence saying that this is a slap in the face to the left, and you have Republicans saying she's too much of a partisan warrior. She had all these mean tweets. You know how Republicans hate mean tweets. So that makes her a non-starter. And John Cornyn said this is the first misstep in the Biden transition, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that she deserves to be rejected or withdrawn? And do you think Biden made a mistake in nominating her?
Well, it might not be a mistake. It might be great to have somebody that's something of a lightning rod that Republicans are going to want to block somebody, right? So it might be a brilliant masterstroke to have somebody to take the attention off everybody else, that's going to sail through. If you're a Republican, you get to say, I stood up to, block Neera Tanden. Meanwhile, all the other people who are, qualified and decent, get confirmed. If I were a Republican, I think I would vote against her. I don't like the tweets. And by the way, I didn't like it I don't have a double standard here. Right. I don't think. I don't like it when Trump does it. I don't like it when she does it. I'm also not sure. I mean, I know she has a really interesting and inspirational biographical story. I don't know what qualifies her to be. Is it OMB director?
Yeah.
It seemed to me like a weird move. Like she's somebody who's like sort of, I know she runs a think tank, but she's sort of like a media personality. And she's someone who has, obviously sent a lot of mean tweets. There's also some controversy about, things that she has done in leading her organization, things that she has, apparently she outed somebody who was a alleged victim of sexual harassment. And there's some other controversies. I think I would vote against her. And I'm not sure what qualifies her for this job to begin with.
Well, she was senior advisor to Secretary Sebelius at HHS in the Obama administration. So I think that's probably the most relevant, executive branch experience that she has. So I don't think it's not just that she runs a think tank. So I think she has the.
Shouldn't you be like, is she an economist, or like, isn't this something that you would want someone who's like really good at like that sort of thing?
Well, I don't think to be an economist to be a budgeteer. It's a slightly different skill set.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? Like some experience with that sort of thing.
I think you need experience with, how government is funded. I mean, that's really what the issue is. It's not just, making the numbers add up, but, what impact do you have when you move these numbers around? I think she has enough inside the government experience to be able to lend that perspective. I do think that Biden is generally trying to strike a bipartisan tone. A tone of, here is a team of experienced professionals that we can all come together around.
Yeah.
And to have somebody who is not that, and I remind you, I like Neera Tanden. I've agreed with Neera Tanden probably on a whole slew of things. So I sort of have any animus towards her, but I do think it doesn't fit the model of the other appointments.
Right.
Not that I think.
And also, isn't this like, I'm sort of against like the entertainmentization of politics. You know what I mean? And like, boosting like people who are like kind of like celebrities and people who have like gotten attention by virtue of being provocative and like, provocative in terms of their political commentary. It feels like this is like a pop culture pick. You know what I'm saying? Like this is not a.
I don't think it's intended to be that. I mean, there's the argument that you have. One person asked me, privately, do you think this was deliberate? Was she deliberately chosen to be the lightning rod and give Republicans, their win, and everyone else can get through? And I said, that doesn't feel like Biden to me. I mean, it might work out that way, but it just doesn't seem like the way he goes about doing things. My inclination is that this is a team that's not extremely online. So, I mean, they might have done a very cursory social media vet, but didn't think that, she said things about Republicans, that's going to make her disqualifying. They probably knew she had issues with the left. And I think the evidence of Biden's team is that they don't care about stepping on the left's toes, but they've picked other people that aren't their favorites already. So they might have thought this is more.
What are some of the things she said? Like, and by the way, you could probably tell, like, I'm not passionately against her. I haven't lost any sleep over this.
Right.
I haven't written about it. But I would vote against her if I were a Republican. If I were an elected Republican, I would just vote against her. But she didn't just say, like, Ted Cruz's, tax policy is bad. I mean, I'm assuming she said some, like, harsh, like, inappropriate, like, things that you would not, if you're Joe Biden and you're about normalcy and decency and sort of restoring, regular order, and, like, I'm assuming some of the things that she has said or tweeted are not the kinds of things that you would deem appropriate or fitting of someone who should be, like, respected. And by the way, again, Republicans are totally guilty of this, and I'm against it. I don't like the fact that Republicans have, like, dumbed down and coarsened the culture, and so I'm actually having a consistent standard here.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's been coarse, and in a time when lots of people are coarse. So
but lots of people don't need to be approved by the U.S. Senate to work in an administration. I mean, shouldn't we hold to a higher standard people who are filling these roles?
I mean, I think there is an argument for that. And again, I don't think she was picked because she's provocative. I think she was picked on wonky grounds, and I think she is qualified on wonky grounds. I think optically, when Biden is presumably trying to strike this bipartisan tone, trying to signal I can make Washington work again, because she gives fodder to Republicans to suggest that's not what Biden is doing, it doesn't seem as strategically smart to me. And I don't think that's why I don't think this was intended to be confrontational.
Yeah.
I think it was. So just to give me an example of a tweet, because she deleted a whole bunch of tweets recently. December 2017, the Republican Party is gleefully supporting an alleged child molester, and everyone who gives money to the RNC is doing the same, referring to Roy Moore. Trump just called a black woman a dog, and about 80% of the GOP don't think he's racist. The whole party needs to be defeated. She deleted harsh attacks at Republican senators, including Susan Collins. She slammed Collins during the Kavanaugh hearings.
That seems unwise.
Said Susan Collins' terrible treatment of Dr. Ford should haunt Collins the rest of her days. Why do people take Susan Collins' statements that she was undecided seriously? Like, if you saw Brett Kavanaugh's attack on other senators as qualifying to be on the Supreme Court, this is never a real question for you. So that's the kind of stuff that she's doing.
All right, so let me make a point that I think is somewhat interesting, and that is all the incentives today are perverse. Like, if you say controversial things, you get more followers, you get more attention, you get invited on TV, right? I think having a standard of you could say those things, but you're not going to be in the administration, like, that would help to disincentivize this sort of behavior, and basically saying, like, you can act that way, but not up here. Mm-hmm. Like, there is a price to pay. And I'm not about, I'm against cancel culture, Bill, but I'm also in favor of standards. And so you could say, like, you could do all those things, but if you have ambitions of being like basically a public servant or whatever, you can't be, we're not going to hire those kinds of people who say those kinds of things. That would be a positive incentive.
If she was tapped to be some kind of domestic policy advisor again, and a non-confirmable position, this probably would be a much more minor story. means there might be a little bit of complaining going on. I don't think she's going to go into the White House planning to behave that way. I don't think she's going to be tweeting from the OMB account, throwing lobs at Republican senators. But of course, now, in all likelihood, it is possible that she will need Republican senators' votes. And so, not wise to pick someone who has insulted them. That's just, and that's why I just don't think Biden surely knows this. And I don't think would have made the pick if he was more aware of it. Now, granted, he gave an interview to Tom Friedman this week where he kind of shrugged it off and said, hey, Neera Tanden, she's brilliant. She'd be a great asset. And, Republicans, they're going to probably pick a fight with somebody at some point anyway. You might argue that means this was done deliberately or he's just rationalizing after the fact. But it just doesn't seem to be the kind of tone that Biden wants to set.
Yeah, I don't think he set her up for this, but I do think it could benefit him that she is made an example of, and the Republicans get their pound of flesh, and Joe Biden gets his cabinet.
I mean, there's always somebody. I mean, it's usually some sort of rinky-dink tax thing.
Linda Chavez. Linda Chavez.
Yeah, the Tom Daschle for Obama.
Right.
Tom Daschle. I mean, you would think, who could be a safer pick than Tom Daschle?
Yeah.
And yet he got taken over a tax thing. Clinton did 3 tries on Attorney General. So this is not unusual that there is something like this. It's unusual that's about tweeting and not and not taxes.
Well, both of us we're both unnominatable and unconfirmable. So, at least they had one of the two. We're 0 for 2 probably, but that's okay. Think of the footage. I mean, earlier, Bill, I don't know if you saw this. I sort of coughed, and instead of using my sleeve, I actually used my hand, and that alone nowadays, I mean, could get me blocked. And I think, imagine the troves of footage of us over the last dozen years that exist. It's not just Matt Lewis wrote this. It's like, here's video of Matt Lewis saying this. It would be, Bob Wright might have to be taken down, and this footage has to be burned.
Now, the other issue that's starting to crop up is Biden doing enough in terms of diversity in the cabinet? You're starting to see some pushing from African-American leaders and Latino leaders trying to make sure that, I mean, there's a lot of cabinet appointments left to go. But so far, the bigger names have not been non-white people, with maybe the exception of Homeland Security. And some of the names being floated for other positions are white, like Michelle Flournoy for defense and Heidi Heitkamp for ag. And these are positions that there are folks saying, look, you have choices here that are not white, and also interiors. There's a debate over interior. They should go to Tom Udall, who's white, or Deb Haaland, who's Native American.
I don't see color. I don't see race. So. Is Udall white? I wasn't clear.
So do you think should Biden heed these calls? He said he was going to have a diverse cabinet. As he would say, he was brought to the dance by African-American voters. Democrats have a bit of weakness with Latino voters that needs to be shored up. So would it be political malpractice to disregard these concerns?
I think he should hire the best person for the job. But I also think that the best person in many cases is going to be not a white man. So I wouldn't be too focused on that. I mean, but I think that, it should probably just shake out to be a cabinet that looks like America.
One name I've not heard about lately is Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, good point. I'm trying to get him on the podcast. Apparently
he wanted UN ambassador, which did go to an African-American woman. And I know there's been chat about him going to VA. I heard that early on. I haven't heard that lately. In my personal opinion, that's a career ender of a position. No one gets out of VA unscathed. So why would you want to saddle yourself with that? And quite frankly, I mean, I think Buttigieg has his talents managing a complicated and a complicated bureaucracy with a history of problems.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily the place for a mid-city sized mayor to jump into. You might need someone with a lot more bureaucratic skill and experience for that. If you don't want to get dragged down into the abyss.
By the way, Bill, I'm reading Doris Kearns Goodwin's book on leadership. Have you seen this?
I've not.
It's a couple years old now. And last night I was reading, I didn't know about this. Bill's yawning at me. You get to talk about history. I can't bring up historical references.
This is my general lack of sleep. It is not directed towards you.
He's totally disinterested in
maybe it's into Doris Kearns Goodwin, but not you, Matt.
You could do an hour and a half talking about Stettinius, and that's great.
We haven't talked about my own podcast yet, did we? I think we skipped that.
Not yet. I talked for 2 seconds about Theodore Roosevelt, and he's checking out. I didn't know this, but when Theodore Roosevelt was police chief, he was inheriting this, administration, bureaucracy, and a lot of the cops were like corrupt. They were on the take. They were doing kickbacks, and they were like, hanging out at bars on the night shift. They were like going and drinking and eating at bars. And like Theodore Roosevelt, to fix this, would go undercover. And he would like go to bars and find the cops that were at the bars drinking and fire them like on the spot. Or he would haul them in the next morning and fire them usually. He went undercover and like would walk the beat and like literally try to find examples of police who were misbehaving and put them in line. And that's a guy who rolled up his sleeves and really took on fixing these problems. Yeah. And he did it in several instances. I think he did something like that in the Navy Department as well. And then he also would try to catch people doing good and give them awards. If he happened to catch a cop who was actually doing something good, he would give them like an award or something. So I just thought of that because of the whole thing about bureaucracy and the difficulties of turning things around that are corrupt or just incompetent.
Well, yeah, and late 19th century, this is the time when corruption in government was pretty rampant, and politics as a profession was pretty frowned upon, and so it was unusual for someone as wealthy as Teddy Roosevelt to stoop to the level of being, a mid-level bureaucrat. And he gave good government, a coolness that hadn't existed yet. And this was a little bit after. I mean, the Republican Party was trying to be the party of civil service reform. And Chester Arthur, passed that bill, even though he was one of the biggest flunkies and hacks around. But it was put on his desk and he signed it. And the Teddy Roosevelt story, I believe, comes shortly after that. And that's what helps makes him a national star before being in the Navy Department and doing the Rough Riders and all that stuff.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you for indulging me. Now, Bill, you're out with a new really cool, your first episode. Yes. So the podcast series is about When America Worked.
Yes.
And you're out with your first episode. This is a produced podcast. It tells the story of, we'll call him a hero, an unsung hero, largely forgotten by history, and his interesting story of how he actually saved, some people would say, saved the Western world.
Now, I say save the world, period. I don't even qualify with Western.
Pretty much, yeah.
Now, I don't know if I made you a United Nations convert by listening to the podcast, but
I'm UN curious now.
So the podcast is titled When America Worked. This is the debut episode. These are scripted podcasts. They take a lot of research and time, so don't expect them to come out once a week. These are all going to take a lot of time to.
Yeah, like Bill, you and I support on Patreon a podcast called Cocaine and Rhinestone.
Yeah.
And it's a very highly scripted, well-produced podcast about country music. And the guy dropped, he's like David Allan Coe's son.
Right.
He dropped like 10 maybe 8 to 10 episodes a couple years ago, which you and I both loved.
Yep.
And I'm still giving him like a couple bucks a month, and I don't know when it's the next season.
Right.
I don't even know if it's ever actually gonna come out.
But he did such good work on season 1. You cut him slack and you let him take his time.
Yeah, and if it ever comes out, I think it's going to be amazing,
right?
Because that's how good season 1 was. But it takes this is not like him interviewing Winona Judd for 15 minutes or what. This is like reading 10 books that you haven't read before and interviewing countless people and then editing and then deciding this person said this, but I don't actually think it's true because it doesn't jibe with what So that's kind of what you're doing.
I very much had that podcast as sort of my North Star. But I couldn't, I was hoping to do maybe 3 at once for the mini season, but it was just taking too long to get the first one done. And so
you even do what he does, which is at the end, he'll do like an hour and a half long episode on Merle Haggard and Okie from Muskogee. And then at the end, the podcast stops, and then he'll do like another 45 minutes of what he calls liner notes, things that didn't make it in the podcast. Right. And you replicate that as well.
I did. I thought there was some opportunity to do that. It's a little sort of detours or little controversies that didn't quite fit into the main narrative. So anyway, Edward Stettinius, who was FDR's second Secretary of State and Truman's first, who's been totally forgotten by history. You were just talking about, Joe Scarborough. You had him on your podcast, and he has a big book on Truman now. Stettinius is mentioned in the way that he is in most Truman tellings, the guy that Truman fired, who Truman thought was not a very impressive character. And he was not very well regarded when he was Secretary of State. I got clued into him by Stephen Schlesinger, who was Arthur Schlesinger's son and wrote a book on the creation of the UN called Act of Creation. And he gives Stettinius his due. And there's a less-known book by a guy named Thomas Campbell called Masquerade Peace, which also is pretty focused on Stettinius and is very positive towards him. These are the only 2 tributes of Stettinius I've ever read that are positive of him. And so I'm very reliant on them. And when you go through, one thing, when you learn about the UN, you learn about it, like that. Like World War II happened, and then there was the UN. The world with this awful war, and everyone agreed to have a UN afterwards, as if it was just like a consensus view that didn't take a lot of work. And then when you read about what was involved, not only do you see how complicated it was diplomatically, but Stettinius had to make a lot of decisions that were not well regarded in the time, not even heartily backed by his superior. And if he wasn't in that position, his predecessor, Cordell Hull, who was Secretary of State for 11 years and was a very highly regarded person, although FDR had his issues with him, very possible if Cordell Hull would have made different decisions that might have led to the collapse of the UN project.
Yeah.
So it's just, to me, it was an illuminating example of, one, somebody who did an enormous amount of good work. I argue the UN did a lot of good work, and therefore it's good that he did it. You might not agree. But I think the amount of good he did for the world is so diametrically opposite to the amount of recognition he got in his time and in history, and that's sort of rare.
Yeah.
And it also is an example of how all these sorts of decisions and compromises and trade-offs and things that maybe don't look good in a certain light actually were really important to getting the job done. And those are the kinds of things I think have relevance to when you look at compromises and awkward deals today and you're so quick to dump on them. Maybe when you hear a story like this, you look at it in a different light. Yeah.
And as I tweeted, this has a, he only gets the job because of a sex scandal. So if it's not for the sex scandal, he probably doesn't get the job. And then he is part of this, spying on our allies to help advance this country. And so lots of things that we didn't know, things I didn't know. Even though I wrote my dissertation on it, I still amazingly didn't know all this stuff.
Did Doris Kearns Goodwin know about it? That's the big question.
Probably not, actually. But so definitely check. How can people, if they want to listen to that? And this is for history and policy and political nerds. This is not this is for someone who likes this stuff. Now, if you're listening to us right now, that's you. How do they go? Listen to episode 1?
So it's on, almost every podcast platform now. It's on Apple, it's on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, etc.
What do they search for?
When America Worked.
When America Worked.
Yeah, and I have it on my website. I just launched a new website, shareable.com. So shareable.com/When America Worked. You'll have all the episodes there. Yeah. Now, it's on TuneIn. I got it on TuneIn, and it should get on Alexa from that. That's where Alexa, all the podcasts on Alexa come from TuneIn. Mm-hmm. When I checked this morning, I couldn't get it on Alexa yet, but that should kick in because I know it is on the TuneIn page.
And then could you tease out if you get funding, if there's enough interest in people supporting this, and by the way, if only Stettinius had some rich relatives, because they should want. I mean, you are basically reviving this guy's legacy. This guy has been, his character has been assassinated. Mm-hmm. Not his character, but his reputation. Yeah. You are bringing this guy back. Any rich Stettinius is out there. And by the way, what a good-looking guy. He's he's George Romney meets Mike Pence. Yes. Is basically what this guy looked like.
He was always considered good-looking.
Yeah, and in fact, I think Truman or somebody in the Joe Scarborough book mentions that is his only positive attribute was that he was a good-looking guy. So I guess 2 questions. 1, how could people help fund this? And 2, if they do, what's going to be who's your next episode? Who would that be on?
Next episode is planned to be Shirley Chisholm.
Okay.
And without giving too much away, she is generally seen as somebody who is a progressive firebrand and a trailblazer, which is not wrong. But she has this huge pragmatic side that is complicated and interesting. And she has
right.
And she has
you and I were giving a speech in Texas.
That's right. That's right.
And someone in the audience asked a question, and I was so glad you were with me because you hit it out of the ballpark by referencing this story.
Right. I don't want to tell the story now.
It's a great story
because I don't want to give it. I gave kind of a simplistic treatment of it in our talk there, but I want to give the full story. I want to have all the details. I want to have all the backstory.
Yeah. There's a joke. There's a joke, by the way, about this. It was this scientist. He's like a world-renowned scientist or whatever, and he has a chauffeur who drives him around to speeches. And the scientist, the chauffeur hears the same speech day in and day out, and at some point they're driving around, and the chauffeur says, "You know what? You've got the best racket in the world. All you do is give these speeches. I've heard you give this thing 100 times. I bet you I could give this speech better than you can." And so the scientist said, "Okay, I tell you what, we're going to change uniforms and we're going to change seats. And at this next college, you're going to give the speech and I'm going to be in the audience." And so the chauffeur gets up and gives this eloquent, speech about science. I wish I had the details because then it would be funnier. And then finally, someone in the audience stands up and asks him this very complicated question. And the guy says, "That is the dumbest question I've ever gotten. I mean, you are so – I'm going to just demonstrate to you how stupid that question is. My chauffeur's in the back of the room. We're going to ask him to stand up and answer it." And similarly, I mean, not that Bill is the chauffeur, but having Bill on stage with you when you're giving a speech is amazing because if anyone asks a question that you don't know the answer to, I was like, I could go into that. And he starts referencing It was amazing. So that was great.
So anyway, if you want to hear that story and many, many more, I got about a dozen in the queue, and they take research, they take writing, they take many recording takes. Yeah. You can give money at patreon.com/Bill Scher. Also helps to subscribe to the podcast, to review the podcast, to rate the podcast, all the podcast platforms, and share it with your friends. Anyone you think would be interested, please to say, hey, I think you might like this. That's all going to help.
When America Worked.
Yep, that's right. And
they can go to shareable.com.
Shareable.com, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. There's a bunch of others out there that they get automatically put on once you start doing a few of these things. So you should be able to find it. Not too hard. If you have a problem, ping me, but you should be able to get a hold of it and share it with your friends.
And it's the holiday season. You've got time to listen to a podcast. And why not give back? You've been listening to this show. Give a little back.
Always going to talk to you, Matt. When are you getting your tree this year?
Sunday.
It's coming in the mail?
No, not anymore, man. Now, I used to buy my Christmas trees online from a farm in Vermont, and it would literally show up in a box. Amazing. And we're talking about like a 7-foot tree or something. These are nice trees. It would show up in a box, a cardboard box on my front stoop. But now that I'm out in the country, I go to so we went to a farm like a month ago, and we picked out our tree. And they put a ribbon around it. And now we will go back on Sunday and, I guess they'll cut it down for us and I'll tie it to the top of my car and bring it back home and we'll put it up. So I'm more of a man of the people now than I used to be.
You're not quite at the point where you're cutting it yourself, though.
Well, give me time. That could be a couple years from now. That I'm really chopping it down myself. But I'd like to say I'm like 15 minutes away from attacking elites and establishment insiders. Like I'm moving toward I'm going to become a populist.
Well, we're going to a tree farm on Saturday. I have been cutting them down myself for several years. I think I still do that at this. I've not been to this particular farm before, so I'm not sure what the protocol is, but I expect to be getting out a saw and chopping it down. That's
because you're always more conservative than me in terms of your lifestyle.
I try.
I mean, you're wearing a flannel shirt right now.
It's true. Although I've not set foot in a church in a long time.
We're going to fix that,
Bill. Well, good to talk to you as always. I will talk to you. Are we Zooming tomorrow?
Let's talk offline, but we didn't do it last week. So, I don't want it to go too many weeks before we get back in the saddle.
All right.
So let's talk about that. But,
okay.
But people should also follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. And if you support me or Bill, then you can be a part of these Zoom chats. We call them the DM Zoom. And we do them every week. We skipped last week. So that's the first time since COVID that we didn't do one, right?
That's right.
And that was because of Thanksgiving. And honestly, one of us was prepared to do it, and the other one said that his wife wouldn't like it. So here we are. Go check out the podcast, When America Worked.
That's right. That's right.
Check that out. Subscribe, rate, and support. And we'll see you back here in the DMZ next week.
All right. Take care.
See ya.